moment Marcus Thompson walked through the front doors of Westbrook High School, the whispers began. Students in the crowded hallway paused mid-conversation, their eyes tracking the unfamiliar face moving through their territory. He kept his head down, shoulders slightly hunched, a worn backpack slung over one arm. To everyone watching, he looked like exactly what they expected. Another quiet kid who wouldn't last a week. None of them noticed how his feet moved with unusual precision, never crossing, always balanced. None of them saw how his eyes, despite appearing downcast, captured every reflection in the trophy cases lining the walls. They saw only what they wanted to see, a target. Within 3 hours, Derek Morrison would test that assumption. Within 3 weeks, the entire school would learn how catastrophically wrong they had been. But that revelation would come at a cost none of them could yet imagine. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because the next special soul relief story is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning had started with rain. Marcus stood at the window of his grandmother's small house on Maple Street, watching water streak down the glass in crooked rivers. Behind him, the kitchen smelled of coffee and the bacon Ruth Thompson had insisted on making, despite his protests that he wasn't hungry. "First day nerves don't excuse skipping breakfast," she had said, setting a plate in front of his empty chair. "Your father would have eaten 3 plates by now and asked for more." The mention of his father sent a familiar ache through Marcus's chest, a hollow space that had lived there for 6 months now, ever since the funeral in Virginia. He turned from the window and took his seat, forcing himself to eat, despite the knot in his stomach. "It's just a school," he said quietly. Ruth paused, coffee cup halfway to her lips. "No place is ever just anything, baby. People are the same everywhere. Some good, some broken, most somewhere in between." She set down her cup and reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Remember what your daddy taught you?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I remember." "All of it," Ruth pressed. "Not just the fighting parts, the other stuff too. The stuff that matters more." He nodded, not trusting his voice. The stuff that matters more. His father had drilled that into him from the age of 4, when the first lessons began in their backyard in Norfolk. Control is the first weapon. Restraint is the second. Violence is the last resort of those who failed at everything else. Sergeant First Class David Thompson had spent 22 years teaching hand-to-hand combat to Army Rangers. He had trained the soldiers who went on to operate in the most dangerous corners of the world. But his greatest student had been his only son. And the lessons he'd imparted went far beyond technique. Marcus finished his breakfast, kissed his grandmother's cheek, and walked out into the rain. Westbrook High School served a suburban community 30 miles outside of Philadelphia. The building itself was a sprawling complex of red brick and institutional windows, surrounded by athletic fields that dominated the landscape. A massive sign near the entrance proclaimed "Home of the Warriors," with smaller banners beneath celebrating the basketball team's 3 consecutive state championships. Basketball was king here. Marcus had gathered that much from the local news his grandmother watched and the conversations he'd overheard at the grocery store during their first week in town. The Westbrook Warriors were a dynasty, led by a senior named Derek Morrison, whose recruitment by Division I colleges had become a source of community-wide pride. Marcus found the main office and collected his schedule from a secretary who barely looked up from her computer. His first class was American History in room 214. He navigated the hallways using the map he'd been given, keeping to the edges of the crowd, making himself small. The strategy lasted until second period. He was walking toward his English class when the collision happened. One moment he was passing a row of lockers. The next, a sharp elbow drove into his shoulder blade, spinning him sideways. His backpack flew from his grip, spilling books and papers across the floor. "Watch where you're going," a voice said, dripping with mock concern. Marcus steadied himself and turned. 3 students stood in a loose semicircle, all wearing matching warm-up jackets, with Warriors basketball emblazoned across the chest. The one in the center was tall and broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that suggested he'd never been challenged in his life. Derek Morrison. Marcus recognized him from the banners. "My bad," Marcus said, keeping his voice neutral. He crouched to gather his scattered belongings. Derek didn't move. Neither did his friends. "You're the new kid, right?" Derek asked. "The one who moved into the old Henderson place." Marcus nodded, stuffing papers back into his bag. "Where are you from?" "Virginia." Derek exchanged a glance with the student on his left, a wiry boy whose warm-up jacket seemed too large for his frame. "Virginia. That's military country, isn't it? Fort Bragg and all that?" "Different base," Marcus said carefully. "Norfolk. Navy brat?" The wiry one snickered. "Army." "Huh." Derek tilted his head, studying Marcus like a specimen under glass. "Army kids usually walk around like they own the place. You walk like you're trying to disappear." He took a step closer. "You trying to disappear, new kid?" Marcus stood, his backpack now secure. Everything in him wanted to meet Derek's stare, to let the other boy see exactly what lay beneath the surface. But his father's voice echoed in his mind. "The dog that shows its teeth first has already lost control. Stay calm, stay invisible, only fight the battles that matter." "Just trying to find my English class," Marcus said. Something flickered in Derek's expression. Disappointment, perhaps, or suspicion. He stepped aside with an exaggerated flourish. "Down the hall, 3rd door on the right. Don't trip over yourself, new kid." Laughter followed Marcus as he walked away. He didn't look back. The encounter set the tone for the days that followed. Derek Morrison and his circle, Marcus learned their names were Jalen Carter and Trent Wallace, seemed to have claimed him as their personal entertainment. The shoves became routine. His locker was open somehow and his gym clothes stolen. Notes appeared in his textbooks, with crude drawings and crueler words. Each incident was designed to provoke, to push him toward a reaction that would justify escalation. Marcus absorbed it all without response. What his tormentors didn't realize was that every shove, every stolen item, every whispered insult was being cataloged. Marcus's mind worked the way his father had trained it to work, assessing threats, identifying patterns, calculating outcomes. Derek always attacked from the left, exploiting his dominant shoulder. Jalen was nervous. His aggression performed rather than genuine. Trent was the true believer, the one who actually enjoyed the cruelty. The dynamics told a story. Derek wasn't bullying Marcus because he wanted to. He was doing it because something in him needed to assert dominance, needed to feel powerful. That need had a source, and sources could be understood. But understanding didn't make the daily gauntlet any easier to endure. "You should tell someone," a voice said during lunch on his 4th day. Marcus looked up from the sandwich he'd been eating alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. A girl stood beside him, holding a tray, with methodical organization. Sandwich at 12 o'clock, apple at 3, water bottle at 9. "Excuse me?" "The basketball guys." She sat down across from him without invitation. "Derek and his crew. I've seen what they're doing. You should report it." "Would that change anything?" She considered the question seriously, the way someone might consider a math problem. "Statistically, no. Principal Waters worships that basketball team. He'd probably find a way to blame you. She bit into her apple. But it would create a paper trail, which could be useful later. Paper trails only matter if you're planning to stay and fight, Marcus said. I'm just trying to make it through the year. The girl studied him with uncomfortable intensity. Interesting strategy. Flawed, but interesting. She extended her hand across the table. I'm Amara Jackson. He shook it. Marcus. I know. Everyone knows. You're the most exciting thing to happen at this school in months. I'd rather not be. Too late for that. She pulled a battered notebook from her bag and flipped it open to a page covered in handwritten notes. I've been keeping track of the incidents, dates, times, witnesses, locations. Journalism is about documentation. Marcus stared at her. You're documenting my harassment? Someone should. The school newspaper won't touch anything critical of the basketball program. Advertising revenue from local businesses depends on championship coverage. So I've started my own independent project. She smiled, and there was something sharp in it. I like exposing things that people want hidden. It's a hobby. Before Marcus could respond, a shadow fell over their table. Coach Raymond Davis was a compact man in his 50s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent decades in gymnasiums. He wore a polo shirt, with Westbrook Wrestling stitched above the heart. You're Thompson, right? The new transfer? Marcus nodded. I've been looking at your old school records. Says here you had an interest in wrestling back in Virginia. Never competed, but your physical education evaluations were... He paused, searching for the right word. Unusual. Unusual how? Your strength and coordination scores were off the charts. Your gym teacher wrote a note recommending you for the wrestling program, but it says you declined. Coach Davis pulled out a chair and sat down, his manner less confrontational than curious. Any particular reason? The question carried more weight than the coach knew. Marcus had declined because wrestling was too close to what he actually did. The grappling techniques his father had taught him were designed for combat, not sport, and the last thing he'd wanted was attention. Wasn't interested, he said. And now, interest levels changed at all? Why? Coach Davis leaned back, his expression candid. Because my program is dying. The basketball team takes all the funding, all the facilities time, all the attention. I've got 6 kids on my roster, and 3 of them can barely execute a double-leg takedown. If I don't produce results at regionals, the board is going to cut us entirely. He met Marcus's eyes directly. I'm not asking you to save the program. I'm just asking you to come to one practice. See if it's something you'd want to be part of. Marcus was about to refuse when he caught Amara watching him with that analytical intensity. Something in her expression said this matters. When's practice? He heard himself ask. The wrestling room was in the basement of the gymnasium, a converted storage space with padded floors and institutional lighting that buzzed faintly overhead. When Marcus arrived that afternoon, 6 students were already warming up on the mats. They ranged in age from freshman to senior, and their skill levels were immediately apparent. 2 of them moved with reasonable competence. The others looked like they'd learned wrestling from YouTube videos. Coach Davis waved Marcus over. Everyone, this is Marcus Thompson. He's thinking about joining us. The reception was mixed. A few nodded in greeting. One, a stocky junior named Victor Reyes, actually smiled and offered a handshake. Another, a lanky senior named Dylan Park, eyed Marcus with skepticism. You ever wrestled before? Dylan asked. Not competitively. Great. Dylan turned to Coach Davis. So we're recruiting 0 experience guys now. That's the plan to save the program? The plan, Coach Davis said evenly, is to find people who want to work hard and learn. Something you might consider doing more of, Dylan. The practice began with standard drills, sprawls, shots, escapes. Marcus held back, performing each technique correctly, but without the precision that would reveal his true capabilities. He moved slightly slower than necessary, made small errors that a casual observer would expect from a novice. But Coach Davis was not a casual observer. After an hour, he called for live sparring. Marcus was paired with Victor, who turned out to be one of the more competent wrestlers. They circled each other on the mat, and Victor shot for a takedown. What happened next lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but Marcus felt every fraction of it stretch like taffy. His body wanted to respond with the efficiency his father had drilled into him. A simple sprawl would have worked, but the counter that followed would have been too clean, too professional. Instead, he deliberately slowed his reaction, allowing Victor to complete the takedown and secure side control. "Nice shot," Marcus said from the mat. Victor grinned and offered a hand to help him up. "Thanks. You're quick, though. Almost got out of that." Coach Davis was watching from the corner, his expression unreadable. After practice, as Marcus was gathering his things, the coach approached. "You've trained before," he said quietly, "and not just wrestling." Marcus's pulse quickened, but he kept his face neutral. "I don't know what you mean. I coached military combatives for 8 years before I came here. I know what controlled movement looks like when someone's trying to hide it." Coach Davis didn't seem angry. If anything, he seemed intrigued. "Whatever your reasons are, they're your business. But if you decide to actually try, this program could use someone like you." He walked away before Marcus could formulate a response. That night, Marcus sat on the back porch of his grandmother's house, watching the stars emerge above the tree line. Ruth joined him after a while, settling into the creaky rocking chair she'd brought from Virginia. "How was school?" she asked. "Fine." "That bad?" Marcus almost smiled. His grandmother had always been able to read him. "There's a wrestling program. The coach asked me to join." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "What did you say?" "That I'd think about it." "And what are you thinking?" Marcus looked at his hands, remembering how they had moved during the sparring session, remembering the effort it had taken to make himself appear ordinary. "I'm thinking about Dad, about what he would want me to do." "Your father would want you to be happy," Ruth said firmly. "He would want you to live your life, not just survive it. He also taught me that showing what you can do invites challenge. That visibility makes you a target." "Baby, you're already a target. Those boys at school have made that clear." She reached over and took his hand. "Sometimes hiding keeps you safe. Sometimes it just makes you smaller." Marcus didn't have an answer for that. The hollow space in his chest seemed to expand, filling with all the things he couldn't say, all the grief he hadn't yet learned to carry. "I miss him, Grandma." "I know, baby. I miss him too." They sat together in silence as the night deepened around them. The following week brought escalation. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, in the empty corridor behind the gymnasium where students cut through to reach the parking lot. Marcus was walking alone when 3 figures materialized from the shadows: Derek, Jalen, and Trent. "Well, look who it is," Derek said, his voice carrying a new edge. "Virginia." Marcus stopped, assessing. The hallway was narrow, poorly lit, with exits at both ends. Derek was blocking the forward path. Jalen and Trent had positioned themselves to cut off retreat. This wasn't an accidental encounter. This was planned. "I heard you joined the wrestling team," Derek continued, moving closer. "That's funny. The only sport more pathetic than wrestling is running away from a fight." He stopped about 6 feet from Marcus. "Is that what you're good at? Running away?" "I don't want trouble," Marcus said. "Nobody wants trouble. Trouble just finds some people." Derek's hands curled into fists. "Here's the thing, Virginia. This is my school, my hallway, my town. And you've been acting like you belong here. I'm just trying to go to class. See, that's the problem. You're always just trying to do something, never actually doing it." Derek took another step forward. "Makes people wonder what you're really about." Behind him, Marcus heard Jalen and Trent closing the distance. His mind shifted into the state his father had called tactical awareness, a heightened perception where everything slowed and crystallized. He saw the tension in Derek's shoulders, the slight widening of his stance that telegraphed an incoming strike. He saw Jalen's nervousness, the way the boy's weight shifted onto his heels. He saw Trent's eagerness, the forward lean of someone who wanted violence. 3 opponents, confined space, limited escape routes. In his father's world, this scenario had a simple solution. But Marcus wasn't in his father's world anymore. He was in a school hallway, surrounded by teenagers whose greatest crime was cruelty, born of insecurity. And he had made a promise. Only fight the battles that matter. "I'm not going to fight you," Marcus said. Derek laughed. "That's not really your choice." The first punch came fast, a right hook aimed at Marcus's jaw. What followed happened so quickly that no one present would later be able to fully describe it. Marcus didn't block the punch. He moved. His body shifted just enough that Derek's fist passed through empty air. The momentum of the swing carried Derek forward, off balance, and Marcus was simply not there. Derek stumbled, caught himself, and swung again. Same result. It was like trying to hit smoke. "The hell?" Trent charged from behind, reaching for Marcus's shoulders. Marcus pivoted, slipping the grab, and Trent's momentum sent him crashing into a row of lockers. Jalen hadn't moved. He stood frozen, eyes wide, watching something he couldn't quite process. Derek, breathing hard now, launched a flurry of strikes. Hooks, jabs, wild swings born of frustration. Marcus flowed around them all, never retaliating, never engaging, simply existing in the spaces between Derek's attacks. It lasted perhaps 30 seconds. To the boys involved, it felt like an hour. Finally, Derek stopped, chest heaving, fists still raised but no longer swinging. Sweat darkened his warm-up jacket. Confusion and anger warred on his face. "What are you?" he demanded. Marcus stood perfectly still, unmarked, his breathing barely elevated. "I'm the kid who's just trying to make it through the year, and I'd really like to get to class now." He turned and walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop him. Behind him, he heard Jalen whisper, "Dude, he didn't even touch you, and you couldn't land a single punch." Derek's response was too quiet to hear. News of the encounter spread through Westbrook High with the speed of wildfire. The story mutated as it traveled, growing more dramatic with each retelling. By the end of the day, rumor had it that Marcus had single-handedly defeated all 3 basketball players while blindfolded. By the next morning, some versions included weapons. Marcus ignored the whispers and stares, but he couldn't ignore the shift in atmosphere. Students who had previously avoided him now watched with open curiosity. Teachers seemed more attentive in class, as if waiting for something to happen. Amara found him during lunch, her notebook open to fresh pages. "Okay," she said, sitting down. "I need everything. What happened exactly?" "Nothing happened. 17 witnesses say otherwise. Well, technically 12 witnesses and 5 people who claim to have witnessed it from locations that would be physically impossible." She clicked her pen impatiently. "The basketball team hasn't come anywhere near you all morning. Derek looked like he'd seen a ghost at assembly. Something definitely happened." Marcus pushed his food around his tray. "There was a situation. I avoided it, that's all." "You avoided it?" She said the word slowly, testing their weight. 3 of the most aggressive guys in school cornered you, and you avoided it. Yes. Amara leaned forward. Marcus, I've been at this school for 3 years. I've watched Derek Morrison put 2 kids in the hospital. Trent Wallace once broke a freshman's arm for looking at his girlfriend. These aren't people who let someone avoid confrontation. She lowered her voice. Whatever you did, it wasn't nothing. Before Marcus could respond, a shadow fell over the table. Coach Davis stood there, his expression somewhere between concerned and calculating. Thompson, my office, now. And the wrestling office was barely larger than a closet, with a desk that took up most of the floor space and walls covered in photographs from past seasons. Teams that had actually won, Marcus guessed, back when the program mattered. Coach Davis closed the door and leaned against it. Word is you had a run-in with Derek Morrison yesterday. Word travels fast. In a school this size, word travels at the speed of boredom. The coach folded his arms. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. What happened in that hallway? Marcus considered his options. Denial was possible, but probably pointless. Too many people had seen too much. The truth was dangerous, but perhaps necessary. They tried to start something, he said. I didn't let them. You didn't let them. The coach's eyebrow rose. 3 athletes, all bigger than you, and you didn't let them. Yes. How? I moved. You moved. Coach Davis was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer, more careful. Thompson, I've been coaching for 25 years. Before that, I served. I've seen a lot of young men who could move in ways that didn't make sense for their age. Some of them had natural talent. Others had been trained. He paused. Your father was military, wasn't he? Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. How did you know? I didn't, not for certain. The coach moved to his desk and sat down heavily. But I had a suspicion. The way you move, the way you deliberately don't move when you're trying to hide it, that's not instinct. That's conditioning. He looked up at Marcus with an expression that was almost gentle. Whatever he taught you, whatever you're carrying from him, you don't have to carry it alone. Okay? You're not alone here. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. For 6 months, he had been alone with his grief, alone with his secrets, alone with the weight of being the son of a man who had trained him to be something extraordinary, and then left him without guidance on how to use it. My father died in a training accident, Marcus heard himself say, 6 months ago. That's why we moved here. My grandmother needed a fresh start, away from everything that reminded her of him. Coach Davis nodded slowly. I'm sorry for your loss. Marcus's voice threatened to break. He was everything. Teacher, father, best friend. He spent my whole life preparing me for something, and then he was just gone. And now, I don't know what I'm supposed to be. You're supposed to be whatever you choose to be, the coach said firmly. That's the gift parents give us. The freedom to become ourselves, not copies of them. He stood and opened the office door. Practice is at 4. I'd like you to be there. And Thompson, whatever you decide about the program, whatever you decide about showing what you can do, that's your choice. No one else's. The next few days brought an uneasy calm to Westbrook High. Derek Morrison and his crew kept their distance, though Marcus could feel their stares following him through the halls. Something had shifted in the dynamic, and neither side was sure what would come next. Marcus began attending wrestling practice regularly. He still held back, still moved slower than he could, still made deliberate errors, but he also allowed himself moments of genuine effort. During drills, he would occasionally execute a technique with precision that made Coach Davis's eyes sharpen with interest. During sparring, he would sometimes let a counter slip through that was just a bit too clean, a bit too professional. Victor Reyes became something like a friend. The stocky junior had a relentless work ethic and an infectious enthusiasm that cut through Marcus's carefully maintained isolation. They started eating lunch together, along with Amara, forming an unlikely trio. "Regional qualifiers are in 3 weeks," Victor said one afternoon, excitement evident in his voice. "If I can place top 3, I get to go to state. First time in Westbrook wrestling history in over a decade." "You've been training hard," Marcus observed. "Yeah, but I'm still not good enough. The guys from Riverside and Kennedy are monsters." Victor's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "I've watched their matches. They're on a different level." "Different level just means different preparation," Marcus said. "It's not about raw talent. It's about understanding angles, timing, leverage." Victor looked at him curiously. "You sound like you know what you're talking about." "Maybe. You should compete." The words came from Amara, who had been silent until now. "At regionals, you have the skill. Anyone who watched you avoid Derek Morrison's punches can see that. Why not actually use it?" Marcus shook his head. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because," he paused, searching for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "Because some things, once you show them, you can't take back. People look at you differently, expect things from you. I'm not ready for that." "Ready or not," Amara said quietly, "sometimes the world doesn't give you a choice." The choice came sooner than any of them expected. It happened during a wrestling practice 3 days later. The team was running drills when the gymnasium door burst open and Derek Morrison walked in, followed by Jalen and Trent. The basketball team had their own practice space on the other side of the building, which made their presence here deeply unusual. Coach Davis straightened immediately. "This is a closed practice. Whatever you need, it can wait." Derek ignored him, his attention fixed on Marcus. "I've been thinking about what happened in that hallway, running it back in my head over and over." He stepped onto the edge of the mat. "I'm a 3-sport athlete. I've trained in boxing since I was 12, and you made me look like I'd never thrown a punch in my life." "I don't want trouble," Marcus said. "Too late for that." Derek's voice carried a new quality, not anger, but something almost like desperation. "I need to understand what happened. I need to know what you are." Coach Davis moved between them. "You need to leave. Now. Before I call Principal Waters." "Go ahead and call him." Derek didn't break eye contact with Marcus. "He's in the pocket of every booster in town. He'll take my side no matter what." He stepped around the coach. "One match. Right here, right now. Wrestling rules. You win. I'll never bother you again. I win. You admit whatever you've been hiding and stop making me look like a fool." The gym was silent. The wrestling team had frozen in place, watching the confrontation unfold. Victor's hand was on Marcus's arm, a gesture of solidarity that Marcus deeply appreciated. "You don't want this," Marcus said quietly. "Try me." "Derek, I'm serious. Whatever you think you need to prove, this isn't the way." "And I'm serious too." Derek pulled off his warm-up jacket, revealing a compression shirt underneath. "One match, unless you're afraid." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt something shift inside him. For 6 months, he had hidden. For 6 months, he had made himself smaller, weaker, less than he was. And for what? To honor a promise made to a man who was gone. To avoid attention that would find him anyway. Sometimes hiding keeps you safe. Sometimes it just makes you smaller. He looked at Coach Davis, who was watching with a mixture of concern and something else. Anticipation, perhaps. He looked at Victor, whose expression clearly said, "You don't have to do this." He looked at Amar, who had slipped in at some point and was already documenting everything in her notebook. Then he looked at Derek Morrison, who stood on the mat with fists clenched and jaw set, a young man carrying something heavy and desperate in his eyes. "Okay," Marcus said. "One match." They faced each other at the center of the mat. Derek had wrestled before. Marcus could see it in his stance, which was solid if not elegant. He'd clearly done some research after their hallway encounter, perhaps even practiced in secret. His weight was distributed properly, his hands up and ready. None of it would matter. Coach Davis, serving as referee despite his clear discomfort with the situation, signaled the start. Derek shot first, a powerful double-leg takedown attempt that would have worked against most opponents. Marcus sprawled, his hips dropping, his weight forcing Derek to the mat. For a moment they grappled, Derek scrambling for position, Marcus controlling the exchange with subtle adjustments. Then, in a movement that seemed to defy physics, Marcus was behind Derek, arm wrapped around his waist, executing a throw that deposited the larger boy on his back with a thud that echoed through the gymnasium. The whole sequence had taken perhaps 4 seconds. Derek scrambled to his feet, shock evident on his face. He engaged again, more cautiously this time, trying to control distance. Marcus let him work, let him feel like he was making progress, then slipped a grab and secured another takedown. This one gentler, almost instructional. "Your left hip opens when you reach," Marcus said quietly, for Derek's ears only. "Creates an angle I can exploit." Derek's response was a grunt of frustration as he fought to escape. Marcus allowed it, then executed a reversal that left Derek pinned beneath him. The match continued for 3 minutes, an eternity in wrestling time. Marcus could have ended it dozens of ways, but instead, he chose to extend it, to teach, rather than dominate. Each position change came with a quiet observation. "You're leaving your arm exposed. Your base is too narrow. Don't telegraph with your shoulders." By the end, Derek was exhausted, not from being overpowered, but from being outclassed so thoroughly that he could no longer deny the gap between them. When Coach Davis finally called the match, Marcus had scored enough points to win by technical superiority, but he had done so without causing injury, without humiliation, without any of the cruelty that Derek himself would have employed. He offered Derek his hand. "Good match." Derek stared at him for a long moment. Something was happening behind his eyes. A war between pride and recognition. Then slowly, he took the offered hand and let Marcus pull him to his feet. "What are you?" Derek asked again. But this time the question was different. Curious rather than accusatory. "I'm just a kid who learned some things from his father," Marcus replied. "Same as you, probably." Something flickered across Derek's face at that. Pain, quickly suppressed. He pulled his hand back and walked toward the door, Jalen and Trent falling in behind him. At the threshold, he paused. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier menace. It sounded almost like a promise of something else, a conversation yet to come. Then he was gone. The aftermath of the match rippled through Westbrook High like a shockwave. By the next morning, a video of the encounter had been uploaded anonymously to social media. It showed Marcus executing techniques that most viewers couldn't even identify, throws and transitions that looked like something from a military training film, not a high school gymnasium. The comments ranged from awed to suspicious. "Who is this kid? Where did he learn to move like that? Someone said his dad was special forces. No way a 15-year-old should be able to do that." Marcus found the attention suffocating, but he also found that hiding was no longer possible. Students who had ignored him now stopped him in hallways to shake his hand or ask questions. Teachers looked at him differently. Even Principal Waters called him into the office for a conversation about athletic opportunities. "I've been talking with our booster club," the principal said, his smile oily and calculated. "They're very interested in students who can bring attention to our athletic programs. Perhaps we could discuss a wrestling scholarship for next year." Marcus declined politely. Whatever he was going to become, it wouldn't be bought. Through it all, Amara continued her documentation. Her notebook had grown thick with observations, and she had started connecting dots that Marcus hadn't expected. "Your father's name was David Thompson," she said one afternoon, sliding a printed article across their lunch table. "Sergeant First Class, U.S. Army, decorated combat veteran, specialist in close quarters combat training." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Where did you find this?" "Public records, military obituary archives." Her expression was gentle, but her eyes were relentless. "He died in a training accident 6 months ago, but the report was classified, which is unusual. Most training accidents are straightforward. Equipment failure, miscommunication, human error. Classified means something else happened." "Amara, stop. There's more." She pulled out another article, this one older. "Your father testified before Congress in 2019 about defense contractor misconduct. He exposed a company called Meridian Security for falsifying training certifications. They lost a $1 billion contract because of him." I said stop. "Marcus," she put her hand over his, "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you understand." She hesitated. "What if your father's death wasn't an accident?" The hollow space in Marcus's chest, the one that had lived there since the funeral, seemed to crack and expand, threatening to consume him entirely. "You don't know what you're talking about," he whispered. "Maybe not, but I know something isn't right, and I think you know it too." Before Marcus could respond, Victor came running toward their table, his face alight with excitement. "Guys, you're not going to believe this. Coach Davis just got word from the regional committee. They've invited Marcus to compete in the open division. No qualifier required. They're calling it a special dispensation based on demonstrated skill." Marcus looked from Victor to Amar to the article still sitting on the table. 3 weeks ago, he had been a ghost trying to make it through the year unnoticed. Now, somehow, he was being asked to step into a spotlight he had never wanted. And behind everything, a question was taking shape. A question about his father's death that he had been too afraid to ask. What if it wasn't an accident? What if the training David Thompson had given his son was preparation not for life, but for survival? That night, Marcus sat once again on his grandmother's back porch, but this time Ruth was not alone. An elderly man sat in the other rocking chair, someone Marcus had seen around the neighborhood, but never spoken to. He was Asian, with a stillness about him that suggested deep reserves of patience. "Marcus," Ruth said, "this is Mr. Chen. He and your father were friends." Marcus's pulse quickened. "You knew my dad?" "I knew David." Mr. Chen's voice was soft, accented with traces of a language Marcus couldn't place. "We served together a long time ago. Different capacities, but the same mission." He turned to face Marcus fully. "He spoke of you often, said you were the best student he ever had, more talented than he ever was at your age. Why are you here?" "Because I made a promise to your father. If anything happened to him, I would watch over you and Ruth until I was certain you were safe." Mr. Chen's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes suggested depths of sorrow. "I am not certain you are safe, Marcus, and I think you know why." The question that Amara had planted blossomed in Marcus's mind. His death. It wasn't an accident, was it? Ruth's breath caught. She had tried so hard to protect him from this, Marcus realized. Tried to give him space to grieve without adding the weight of suspicion. "No, Mr. Chen said quietly. It was not an accident. Your father was murdered by people he had made enemies of. People who want to make sure his testimony cannot be corroborated. People who may eventually come looking for anyone else who knows what he knew. But I don't know anything. You know what he taught you. You carry his methods, his techniques, his approach. To certain people, that makes you a threat. Mr. Chen rose slowly from the rocking chair. The training he gave you was never just about discipline or self-defense, Marcus. It was preparation. He always feared this day might come. Marcus felt the world tilting beneath him. Everything he thought he understood, shifting into new and terrifying configurations. What am I supposed to do? He asked. That is your choice to make. But whatever you decide, you should know. The men who killed your father are watching. They have been watching since you arrived in this town. Mr. Chen walked toward the edge of the porch. The question is not whether you will face them. The question is whether you will be ready when you do. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Marcus alone with his grandmother and a truth he could no longer escape. The hollow space in his chest filled with something new. Not grief, but purpose. Not fear, but resolve. His father had been murdered, and somewhere out there, the people responsible were waiting to see what Marcus Thompson would become. Just before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. And if this story has you holding your breath, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about Marcus. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. The night after Mr. Chen's revelation, Marcus didn't sleep. He lay in his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory of his father through the lens of this new truth. The early morning training sessions that had started when Marcus was barely old enough to walk. The way David Thompson had insisted on drilling scenarios, not just techniques, but situations. What do you do if 3 men approach you in an alley? What if one has a weapon? What if they're trying to take you, not hurt you? Marcus had always assumed these were abstract exercises. Now he understood they were rehearsals. His father had been preparing him for something specific, something that had finally arrived. At 3 a.m., unable to bear the stillness any longer, Marcus slipped out of bed and made his way to the backyard. The grass was wet with dew, the air cold enough to raise goosebumps on his bare arms. He began to move through forms, not the modified, slowed-down versions he had been performing at Westbrook, but the real sequences his father had taught him. His body flowed through techniques designed for situations far more dangerous than high school hallways. Joint locks that could disable. Strikes calibrated for maximum efficiency. Transitions meant for multiple opponents. Each movement carried the weight of his father's voice, guiding him from somewhere beyond reach. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Trust your training. By the time dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Marcus had made a decision. He would compete at regionals. He would step into the spotlight he had been avoiding. And he would draw out whoever was watching, whoever had killed his father, and he would face them on his own terms. It was, he knew, exactly what David Thompson would have wanted him to do. The 2 weeks leading up to regionals transformed Marcus's life at Westbrook High. Word of his decision to compete spread quickly, and suddenly, the wrestling program, long ignored in favor of basketball glory, became the subject of intense interest. Students who had never attended a match began asking about ticket availability. Local newspapers ran stories about the mystery transfer student who had humiliated the school's basketball star in an impromptu match. Coach Davis handled the attention with the weary expertise of someone who had seen too many programs rise and fall on the backs of individual talent. "Don't let it go to your head," he told Marcus after a particularly intense practice. Fame is a fire. It can warm you, or it can burn you. The difference is how you feed it. I'm not doing this for fame. I know. The coach's expression softened, but that doesn't mean you can control what it becomes. The increased visibility brought unexpected allies. Victor had stepped up his training, pushing himself harder than ever in preparation for his own regional matches. Amara had shifted her investigative focus, digging deeper into Meridian security and the circumstances surrounding David Thompson's death. Even some of the other wrestling team members, Dylan Park among them, had dropped their initial skepticism and embraced Marcus as a legitimate teammate. But the most surprising development came from a direction Marcus never expected. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before the regional competition. Marcus was leaving the gymnasium after practice when he found Derek Morrison waiting outside. The basketball star was alone. No Jalen, no Trent, no entourage of any kind. He leaned against the building wall with his arms crossed, and something in his posture suggested he had been there for a while. "We need to talk," Derek said. Marcus stopped, every instinct alert. "About what?" "About what happened, the match." Derek pushed off the wall and walked toward him, stopping at a distance that was conversational, rather than confrontational. "I've been trying to figure you out for 2 weeks, watching videos, reading about different fighting styles, asking around, and I still don't understand how you did what you did. I trained for a long time. That's not what I mean." Derek's voice carried a frustration that seemed directed inward, rather than at Marcus. "I mean, why? Why did you hold back? Why didn't you just destroy me when you had the chance?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "Would you have preferred that?" "I don't know. Maybe." Derek ran a hand over his face. "At least then I'd understand the rules. Someone beats you. They dominate you. They prove they're better. That's how it works. That's how it's always worked. That's how your father taught you it works." The words slipped out before Marcus could stop them, and he immediately regretted them. Derek's expression shifted, a flash of pain quickly suppressed, followed by a hardening of his features. "What do you know about my father?" "Nothing. I'm sorry. That was—" "No." Derek's voice cracked slightly. "You're right. That is how he taught me." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his words seemed to cost him something. "My dad was a boxer. Golden Gloves, could have gone pro. But he blew out his knee. He's been training me since I could walk. Every sport, every competition. If I don't win, I don't matter. That's the lesson." Marcus felt something unexpected. Recognition. His own father had trained him relentlessly too. But the philosophy had been different. David Thompson had taught his seeing that skill was a responsibility, not a weapon. That true strength lay in knowing when not to use it. "My father died 6 months ago," Marcus said quietly. "He was the one who taught me." Derek looked up, surprise evident on his face. "I didn't know. Most people don't." They stood in silence for a moment, two young men separated by circumstance, but connected by something neither fully understood, the weight of living in a father's shadow. "What was he like?" Derek asked. "He was—" Marcus searched for words adequate to describe David Thompson. "He was patient. He believed that the point of learning to fight was so you wouldn't have to. He used to say that violence was the last resort of those who had failed at everything else." Derek absorbed this, something shifting behind his eyes. "That's different from what I learned." "Maybe. Or maybe it's just another version of the same thing." Marcus hesitated, then made a decision. "You're athletic, strong. Your instincts aren't bad, but you're fighting against yourself half the time, carrying something that makes you act before you think." "Like what?" like anger that doesn't belong to you, like expectations you didn't choose. Marcus met Derek's eyes directly. Whatever your father put in you, it's not the only thing you can be. For a long moment, Derek said nothing. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. "Good luck at regionals," he said. "I mean it." Marcus shook his hand, feeling the significance of the gesture. "Thanks." As he walked away, he heard Derek call out behind him. "Hey, Thompson, the guys from Meridian Security who've been asking around about you. You might want to watch out for them." Marcus froze. "What did you just say?" Derek's expression was serious. "3 men came to my house last week, said they were private investigators looking into a military training accident. They were asking about you specifically, where you lived, who you spent time with, what you did after school." He paused. "My dad talked to them for about an hour. I don't know what he told them." "What did they look like?" "Professional, clean cut. One of them had a scar on his neck. Looked like it went under his collar." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't say anything to them. But my dad, he's desperate for connections. Thinks they might help with my recruitment or something." Marcus's mind raced. They weren't just watching. They were gathering intelligence, building a profile, preparing for something. "Thanks for telling me." "Yeah, well," Derek shrugged. "You could have destroyed me and you didn't. Figured I owed you one." That night, Marcus told his grandmother everything. Ruth listened in silence, her face growing more drawn with each revelation. When he finished, she sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on something beyond the walls of their small house. "I always knew this day might come," she said finally. "Your father warned me. He said the people he'd crossed had long memories and longer reach. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were grieving. Because I hoped it wouldn't matter. Because," her voice broke, "because I wanted you to have a chance at being normal, at least for a little while." Marcus moved to sit beside her, taking her weathered hands in his. "I don't know how to be normal, Grandma. I'm not sure I ever did." "That's not true." She squeezed his hands fiercely. "You are the most normal thing in my life, Marcus. You eat too much. You forget to clean your room. You get lost in your own head for hours at a time. That's normal. That's human. Whatever else you are, whatever your father made you into, you're still my grandson." They sat together as darkness fell. Grandmother and grandson united against forces they couldn't fully see, but could no longer pretend didn't exist. Later, Marcus found Mr. Chen waiting in the backyard. "They're moving faster than I expected," the elderly man said without preamble. "My sources indicate they've already identified your school, your residence, and your daily patterns. What do they want?" "Insurance. Your father's testimony was damaging, but it was also incomplete. There are files, evidence he gathered during his investigation, that were never entered into the official record. Meridian believes you may know where they are." "I don't." "They don't know that." Mr. Chen's expression was grave. "And even if they did, you represent a loose end. You carry your father's knowledge, his techniques, his approach. To them, that makes you a potential threat that must be neutralized." The word hung in the air between them. Neutralized. Such a clinical term for what they really meant. "What are my options?" "You can run. Disappear. I have contacts who could help you and Ruth start over somewhere else. Somewhere they might not find you." Mr. Chen paused. "Or you can face them, draw them out. End this on your terms." "How?" "The regional competition. You've already made yourself visible. They'll be there watching. If we're careful, we can use that to our advantage." Marcus thought of his father, of the training that had filled his entire childhood, of the promise he had never understood until now. What do you need me to do?" The days before regionals passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus trained harder than he ever had, not just physically, but mentally and strategically. Mr. Chen joined Coach Davis in overseeing his sessions, the two men bringing different but complementary expertise. Where Coach Davis focused on wrestling technique and competition strategy, Mr. Chen drilled Marcus on awareness, evasion, and the art of reading danger. "Your father taught you to fight," Mr. Chen said during one session. "But fighting is only one tool. Seeing the threat before it materializes, that is the true art." They ran scenarios in the gymnasium after hours, Victor and Amara serving as lookouts, while Marcus practiced identifying potential threats in a crowd. Mr. Chen would signal Confederates, school staff who owed him favors apparently, to move through the building in specific patterns. And Marcus had to spot them, track them, and anticipate their movements. "The men from Meridian are professionals," Mr. Chen explained. "Former military contractors, private security operatives. They won't attack openly unless they have no other choice. Instead, they'll create opportunities, moments of isolation, distractions, manufactured chaos. Your job is to recognize these moments and deny them. And if I can't deny them, then you do what your father trained you to do." Meanwhile, Amara's investigation had yielded disturbing results. "Meridian Security lost their primary contract after your father's testimony," she reported, spreading documents across their lunch table. "But they didn't go out of business. They rebranded, restructured, started taking smaller jobs. Private security for executives, threat assessment for corporations, that kind of thing. So they're still operational. More than operational. According to their SEC filings, they've been growing steadily for the past 2 years. Someone is funding them. Someone with deep pockets and a vested interest in making sure certain stories never come to light." Victor looked up from his own pre-competition meal. "This is way bigger than high school drama, isn't it?" "Yeah," Marcus admitted. "It is. And you're still going to compete?" "I don't have a choice. If I hide, they'll just wait until I'm alone. At least at regionals, I'll be in a public space with witnesses." "And with us," Victor added firmly. "Whatever happens, we've got your back." Amara nodded in agreement, and Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his father's death, the warmth of belonging. These people, who he had known for only a few weeks, had become something more than acquaintances. They had become allies, friends, family. The morning of regional championships dawned crisp and clear. Marcus woke before sunrise, his body thrumming with a mixture of anticipation and focused calm. He went through his pre-competition routine, stretches, breathing exercises, mental visualization, then joined his grandmother for breakfast. Ruth had prepared his favorite meal, scrambled eggs with cheese, bacon, and toast with strawberry jam. It was the same breakfast David Thompson had always made before Marcus's childhood matches and exhibitions. "Your father would be proud," Ruth said softly. "I hope so." "He would." She reached across the table and touched his face. "Whatever happens today, remember who you are. Not just what you can do. Who you are. That's what matters." Marcus covered her hand with his own. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, baby. Now go show them what a Thompson can do." The regional competition was held at a massive sports complex about an hour from Westbrook. The venue had multiple mats running simultaneously, with athletes from dozens of schools warming up in designated areas. The noise was overwhelming. Coaches shouting instructions, wrestlers slamming practice dummies, spectators filling the bleachers with a constant buzz of conversation. Marcus arrived with Coach Davis, Victor, and the rest of the Westbrook wrestling team. Dillon Park had finally come around, greeting Marcus with a genuine handshake and a gruff, "Don't embarrass us out there." The other team members followed suit, their earlier skepticism transformed into something like pride. Amar was already in the stands, her notebook open, her eyes scanning the crowd with the same intensity Marcus had learned to appreciate. She caught his eye and nodded slightly, a signal that she was watching for anything unusual. Mr. Chen was present as well, though Marcus only spotted him once, near an exit on the far side of the arena. The elderly man was dressed like any other spectator, but his positioning was deliberate. He had clear sight lines to multiple entry points and could move quickly if needed. The competition began at 9 o'clock sharp. Victor's matches came first in the 152-pound weight class. He had drawn a difficult bracket, with his first opponent being a returning state qualifier from Kennedy High. Marcus watched from the coaching area as his friend took the mat. The match was intense from the start. Victor fought with everything he had, executing techniques with precision and heart. The Kennedy wrestler was technically superior, but Victor's relentless work ethic closed the gap. They traded points through the first 2 periods, entering the third tied. With 30 seconds left, Victor attempted a double-leg takedown. His opponent sprawled, but Victor transitioned, just as Marcus had shown him, catching an ankle and driving through. The takedown scored 2 points, and Victor held on through the final seconds to secure the victory. "Yes," Coach Davis pumped his fist. "That's what I'm talking about." Victor bounded off the mat, grinning ear to ear. "Did you see that? The transition, just like you taught me." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You did that yourself. I just pointed at the door. You walked through it." The morning continued with mixed results. Victor won his second match but lost his third, finishing with a respectable record that qualified him for state consideration. Dillon Park won 2 before being eliminated. The other Westbrook wrestlers had similar outcomes. Nothing spectacular, but nothing embarrassing either. Then it was Marcus's turn. The open division featured older, more experienced competitors, seniors with years of competitive experience, and in some cases, committed scholarships to college programs. Marcus's first opponent was a returning state champion, a massive senior from Riverside, who outweighed him by at least 20 pounds. As they took the mat, Marcus felt the weight of hundreds of eyes upon him. The mysterious transfer student, the kid who had humiliated Derek Morrison, the ghost who moved like water. The referee signaled the start. What followed left the arena stunned. Marcus didn't just win. He dominated. Every technique the Riverside wrestler attempted was countered before it fully formed. Every position he achieved was immediately reversed. It was like watching someone wrestle against their own shadow. Futile, frustrating, and ultimately hopeless. The match ended in 47 seconds by technical fall. The crowd sat in shocked silence as the referee raised Marcus's hand. Then, slowly, applause began to build. Not the polite acknowledgement of a close match, but genuine amazement at what they had just witnessed. Marcus returned to his team's area, where Coach Davis was shaking his head in disbelief. "I knew you were good," the coach said. "I didn't know you were that good." "Neither did I," Marcus admitted, and it was partly true. He had spent so long hiding that he had almost forgotten what it felt like to be fully present in his capabilities. His second match was similar. His third was even faster. By the semifinals, word had spread throughout the venue. People who had been watching other matches migrated to Marcus's mat. Coaches from other schools lined up along the edges, studying his movements, trying to understand what they were seeing. But among the legitimate spectators, Marcus noticed others. 3 men who didn't quite fit. They wore casual clothes and held programs, but their eyes never focused on the action. Instead, they scanned the crowd, tracked the exits, and occasionally spoke into devices hidden beneath their collars. Meridian Security. Marcus caught Mr. Chen's eye across the arena. The elderly man nodded almost imperceptibly. He had seen them too. The trap was set. Now came the dangerous part. The finals were scheduled for mid-afternoon, with all weight classes competing sequentially on a single championship mat. Marcus's division was second to last, giving him time to observe and prepare. He spent the waiting period in deliberate meditation, centering himself for what was to come. Around him, the arena buzzed with excitement. Westbrook supporters had grown from a handful to a significant presence, drawn by the spectacle of his earlier performances. Victor sat beside him, offering quiet encouragement. Amara continued her surveillance from the stands, her notebook filled with notes and observations. At 3:47 p.m., Marcus's name was called. He rose and walked toward the championship mat, moving through a crowd that parted before him like water around a stone. His opponent was already waiting, a senior from Kennedy named Xavier Brooks, a four-time state champion with a wrestling scholarship to Penn State already secured. They faced each other across the mat, separated by nothing but air and the weight of expectation. "Good luck," Xavier said, and meant it. "You too." The referee signaled the start. Unlike Marcus's earlier matches, this one was competitive from the first engagement. Xavier was genuinely skilled, not just technically proficient, but tactically intelligent. He didn't make the mistakes that had undone Marcus's previous opponents. He protected his angles, controlled distance, and chose his attacks carefully. The first period ended scoreless. The second period saw an exchange of points, a takedown by Xavier, an escape and reversal by Marcus. The crowd was on their feet, sensing they were witnessing something special. Even Coach Davis had stopped coaching, content to simply watch. Entering the third period, Marcus led by a single point. Xavier came out aggressive, throwing combinations with the desperation of someone who knew time was running out. Marcus absorbed the onslaught, looking for the opening he needed. It came with 30 seconds remaining, a slight overextension on Xavier's part, a momentary lapse in base. Marcus moved. The throw was beautiful, a perfect arc of motion that deposited Xavier on his back with authoritative force. Marcus secured the pin before his opponent could react, and the referee's hand slapped the mat 3 times in quick succession. It was over. The arena exploded into chaos. Westbrook fans stormed toward the mat area, their cheers drowning out everything else. Coach Davis was openly crying, embracing Marcus with a fierceness that spoke of years of disappointment finally resolved. Victor lifted him off the ground despite being shorter, somehow finding the strength. Through it all, Marcus remained aware. Even as he accepted congratulations, even as trophy presentations began, his eyes never stopped scanning. The 3 men from Meridian had moved closer during the commotion, using the crowd as cover. They were going to make their move soon. Marcus could feel it. He excused himself from the celebration, claiming he needed to use the restroom. Coach Davis nodded, still beaming with pride. Mr. Chen, who had positioned himself near the main exit, gave Marcus a significant look. The corridor leading to the restrooms was quieter, the sounds of celebration muted by distance. Marcus walked with apparent casualness, every sense extended to its maximum range. He felt them before he saw them. 2 bodies converging from behind, a third stepping out from a maintenance doorway ahead. Professional movement, professional spacing. "Marcus Thompson," one of them said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "We'd like to have a conversation." Marcus stopped walking, his back still turned to the two men behind him. "About what?" "About your father's files, about certain evidence he gathered that never made it into official channels." The speaker stepped closer. "We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." Slowly, deliberately, Marcus turned to face them. What the men saw was a 15-year-old boy, barely 5'7", still in his wrestling singlet. What they didn't see, couldn't see, was the decades of training coiled behind his eyes, the combat-ready focus that had been his father's final gift. "My father never told me about any files," Marcus said quietly. "If you killed him looking for them, you killed him for nothing." The lead agent's expression didn't change. "We're not here to discuss what happened to your father. We're here to collect what belongs to us." "Then we have a problem, because I don't have what you want." "We'll be the judge of that." The lead agent gestured to his colleagues. "Bring him." Quietly. Two men moved toward Marcus from behind. What happened next took less than 5 seconds. Marcus didn't wait for them to reach him. He moved backward into their approach, using their momentum against them. The first man's reach and grab was redirected into his partner, sending both stumbling. Marcus flowed around them, staying outside their effective range while positioning himself for the next exchange. The lead agent, seeing the situation deteriorating, produced something from his jacket, a device that crackled with electrical discharge. A taser. "Last warning," he said. "Come quietly, or this gets ugly." Marcus's response was to drop into a stance that would have been immediately recognizable to anyone trained in military combatives. His weight centered, his hands open and ready, his eyes fixed on the weapon. "My father taught me something," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the danger. "He said the moment your enemy produces a weapon, they've admitted they can't win without it. They've shown you their weakness." The agent's finger tightened on the trigger. He never completed the motion. Marcus closed the distance in a single explosive movement, his hand catching the agent's wrist and redirecting the taser away from both of them. A precise strike to the elbow hyperextended the joint, forcing the weapon to drop. The sweep took the agent's legs, and Marcus controlled the descent, leaving the man pinned but uninjured. The other two agents had recovered and were advancing. Marcus flowed from the pin into a defensive crouch, ready for the next assault, when the corridor suddenly filled with people. Mr. Chen appeared from one direction, flanked by two men Marcus didn't recognize, but who moved with the same professional efficiency as the Meridian agents. From the other direction came a crowd of Westbrook supporters who had apparently followed the sounds of commotion, with Coach Davis and Victor at the front. The remaining two agents assessed the situation instantly. Whatever mission parameters they were operating under clearly didn't include engaging multiple witnesses. They grabbed their fallen colleague and retreated through the maintenance door, disappearing into the bowels of the building. Coach Davis reached Marcus first, his earlier joy replaced by alarm. "What the hell just happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Marcus was breathing hard, adrenaline still surging through his system. "They won't be back. Not today." Mr. Chen approached, his expression satisfied. "Well handled. Your father would be proud." "Is it over?" "This part of it, yes." The elderly man placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "The larger situation, that will take more time to resolve. But you've made a statement today. They know you're not an easy target." Victor pushed through the crowd, his face pale. "Dude, what were those guys? What is going on?" Marcus looked at his friend, at the coach who had believed in him, at the gathering crowd of people who had witnessed something they didn't fully understand. "It's a long story," he said finally, and I think it's time I told it. The aftermath of the regional championship extended far beyond the sports complex. Marcus's victory was covered extensively by local media, not just the wrestling itself, but the incident that had occurred afterward. The official story, carefully managed by Mr. Chen and his contacts, was that overzealous fans from a rival school had attempted to intimidate the new champion. It was a thin cover, but it held. The real story emerged slowly, piece by piece, as Marcus began to share the truth with those who had become his inner circle. He told them about his father, the training, the testimony, the investigation into Meridian security. He told them about the classified accident that was actually murder. He told them about the files that remained missing, the evidence that could bring down not just a single company, but an entire network of corrupt contractors who had profited from falsified certifications and covered up failures. So there are files, Amara said, her notebook open, her pen moving rapidly. Evidence your father gathered, and Meridian wants them because they would prove everything he testified about and more. Things that weren't included in the official record because he was still gathering proof when Marcus's voice caught. When they killed him. But you don't know where the files are. I didn't. Marcus paused, remembering something his grandmother had said on the night of his father's funeral. Something that hadn't made sense at the time, but now clicked into place. But I think I do now. The old Henderson place, Marcus's grandmother's house, had been in the Thompson family for generations. It had served as a vacation home, a retirement refuge, and most recently, a sanctuary for a grieving widow and her grandson. It had also served as a hiding place. Marcus found the files exactly where his father had left them, inside a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards of the basement, behind a false wall that could only be opened by pressing 3 specific bricks in the correct sequence. David Thompson had shown Marcus the sequence years ago, during a summer visit, presenting it as a game. Remember this, son. Someday it might be important. The compartment contained a single waterproof case. Inside the case were 3 flash drives, each labeled with coded designations that Marcus didn't recognize, and a handwritten letter addressed to him. Marcus, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it. Everything I've done, the training, the preparation, the secrets I've kept, has been to give you the tools to survive what might come. The drives contain evidence of things powerful people want buried. Names, dates, documents, recordings, enough to bring down Meridian and everyone connected to them. I gathered it over years, at great personal risk, because I believed the truth mattered more than my safety. I was wrong about that. The truth matters, but you matter more. If you're safe, if they're not actively threatening you, then my advice is to destroy these drives and forget they ever existed. Live your life. Be happy. Find love. Build a family. Become whatever you want to be. The fight isn't worth your future, but if they've found you, if they've threatened Ruth, if there's no other way, then use them. Contact the addresses I've included below. There are people who will know what to do with this information. People I trust. Whatever you decide, know that I am proud of you. Not for what you can do, but for who you are. You are the best thing I ever created, and nothing, not my failures, not my enemies, not death itself, can take that away. I love you, son. Dad Marcus read the letter 3 times before he could see clearly enough to continue. Before we see what Marcus decides, I need to ask you something. Has this story touched you? Because if it has, you're part of a community that believes in second chances, in hidden strength, in fighting for what matters. Subscribe now and join us, because tomorrow's story might be the one that changes your life. Now back to Marcus and the decision that will define everything. The decision took 3 days. During that time, Marcus consulted with Mr. Chen, who confirmed that the addresses his father had mentioned connected to a network of journalists, prosecutors, and investigators who specialized in exposing government corruption. He consulted with his grandmother, who supported whatever choice he made while making clear her priority was his safety. He consulted with Coach Davis, who offered practical wisdom about the nature of commitment and consequence. And he consulted with Amara, whose eyes had lit up the moment she understood what the files represented. "This is bigger than any story I've ever imagined," she said, her voice awed. "This could change everything. It could also make me a target for the rest of my life. You're already a target. At least this way, you'd be a target who fought back." In the end, the decision wasn't difficult. It was just hard. Marcus contacted the addresses his father had provided. He shared the files with people who would know how to verify them, protect them, and eventually release them. He gave interviews to journalists who had spent years trying to penetrate Meridian's wall of silence. He provided testimony to a special prosecutor who had been building a case with limited evidence. The dominoes began to fall. Within 6 weeks, Meridian Security was under federal investigation. Within 3 months, indictments were handed down, not just for the company's leadership, but for the government officials who had enabled their corruption. Within a year, the first convictions were secured, and the network that had profited from falsified certifications and covered up failures was systematically dismantled. David Thompson's evidence had been comprehensive, devastating, and irrefutable. His son's courage in bringing it forward had been the catalyst for justice finally served. The last day of school at Westbrook High arrived with the promise of summer and the weight of everything that had changed. Marcus walked the hallways one final time, passing lockers and classrooms that had witnessed his transformation from invisible newcomer to regional champion to accidental crusader. Students still stared, but now their attention carried respect rather than curiosity. He found Derek Morrison waiting by the front entrance, much as he had been that day weeks ago when their complicated relationship had begun its evolution. "Big summer planned?" Derek asked. "Training. Preparation for next year. Maybe some actual relaxation if my grandmother has anything to say about it." Derek nodded, then seemed to struggle with something internal. "I've been thinking about what you said, about carrying anger that doesn't belong to you, about being more than what someone else put in you. And I started seeing a therapist." The words came out awkward, almost embarrassed. "My mom's idea, but I'm going with it. Turns out there's a lot of stuff I never dealt with about my dad, about pressure, about..." He trailed off, then shrugged. "About everything." "That takes courage," Marcus said, and meant it. "Yeah, well, I learned something about courage from watching you." Derek extended his hand. "Thanks, Thompson, for not destroying me when you had the chance, for showing me there was another way to be strong." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Take care of yourself, Morrison, and good luck with the recruitment. Going to Duke, full scholarship. Congratulations, you earned it." Derek walked away, and Marcus watched him go. A young man still carrying burdens, still fighting battles, but no longer alone in the struggle. The summer stretched ahead, filled with training and healing, and the slow work of building a new life. Marcus spent mornings in the park with Mr. Chen, learning techniques his father had never taught him, methods of awareness and evasion that came from traditions older than the military combatives he had grown up with. He spent afternoons with Coach Davis, preparing for the state championships that awaited in the fall. He spent evenings with Victor and Amara, building friendships that would last far beyond high school. And he spent nights with his grandmother, sitting on the back porch, watching stars emerge above the tree line, talking about the man they had both loved and lost. "He would be proud of you," Ruth said one evening, echoing the words she had spoken so many times before. "I know," Marcus replied, and for the first time, he truly believed it. His father had given him tools for survival, techniques, awareness, discipline. But he had also given him something more important, a framework for understanding what strength really meant. Not domination, but protection. Not aggression, but justice. Not violence, but the willingness to stand for something worth defending. Marcus still carried the hollow space where his grief lived. He suspected he always would. But alongside the grief, other things had grown. Pride in what he had accomplished, hope for what he might yet become, love for the people who had supported him through the darkness. The past could not be changed. His father was gone, and nothing would bring him back. But the future remained unwritten, and Marcus Thompson intended to write it with everything he had learned. On the first day of junior year, Marcus walked through the front doors of Westbrook High School with his head held high. Students still whispered as he passed, but now the whispers carried his name with respect rather than malice. The trophy case had a new addition, a regional championship plaque with his photo prominently displayed. The wrestling room had been renovated over the summer, funded by boosters who had finally recognized the program's potential. Coach Davis met him in the hallway, his weathered face split by a genuine smile. "Ready for another year?" "More than ready." "Good, because I've got scouts coming to every match this season. Colleges are interested, Thompson. Very interested." Marcus nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere, on the training that awaited, on the championships to come, on the legacy he was building with every choice he made. His father had taught him to fight. Life had taught him when to fight and what to fight for. The rest was up to him. Across town, in her small office at the local newspaper where she had secured a summer internship, Amara Jackson put the finishing touches on a story she had been working on for months. It documented the rise and fall of Meridian Security, the courage of the whistleblower who had exposed them, and the son who had carried his father's mission to completion. The headline read, "Fallen Hero's Son Finishes What His Father Started." It was, she thought, the most important story she would ever write. In a modest house on Maple Street, Ruth Thompson sat in her rocking chair, a photo album open on her lap. The pages chronicled her son's life, from childhood to military service, to fatherhood, to the man he had become before death claimed him too soon. The last page held a new photo, added just that week. Marcus stood on a winner's podium, a medal around his neck, his face shining with triumph and something else, something that looked remarkably like peace. She traced her finger over his image, remembering the little boy who used to train in the backyard, the young man who had carried her furniture during the move, the grandson who had become a hero in his own right. "You did good, David," she whispered to the empty room. "Our boy turned out just fine." The story of Marcus Thompson was far from over. There would be more championships to win, more challenges to face, more enemies to overcome. There would be college applications and scholarship offers and decisions that would shape the rest of his life. There would be love and loss and all the complicated experiences that made up a human existence. But for now, in this moment, there was only this: a young man walking forward into an uncertain future, carrying the lessons of those who had come before, ready to face whatever came next with courage, discipline, and the quiet strength that came from knowing exactly who he was. His father had prepared him for survival. Life had prepared him for something more. And Marcus Thompson, the boy they had underestimated, the fighter they had dismissed, the son who had honored his father's sacrifice, he was just getting started. In the end, the bullies who had shoved him learned what so many others would learn in the years to come. Some people carry depths that cannot be seen from the surface. Some quiet souls hold storms within them. And some young men, raised by warriors, become warriors themselves, not through cruelty or aggression, but through the patient cultivation of strength in service of something greater than themselves. Marcus Thompson never forgot what his father taught him. Control is the first weapon. Restraint is the second. Violence is the last resort of those who have failed at everything else. But he added a lesson of his own. Love is the reason for all of it. Love for family, for friends, for justice, for truth. Everything else flows from there. What would you fight for if you had to fight? And who would you become if you let yourself? If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share to experience more journeys of hidden strength and unexpected redemption.